You know what sports psychology is all about? It's not about winning whatsoever. It's about losing and how you learn from losses and how you grow from losses.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. My guest today is Sébastien Page. He is the author of The Psychology of Leadership. He's the chief investment officer at T. Rowe Price. They're overseeing $500 billion in assets, and he is one of LinkedIn's top 15 voices in finance from Canada. I'm so excited to chat living in Maryland. Sébastien, thanks for being on the show today. I'm so excited to share you with our guests or with our audience. Thanks for being here.
Anthony, I am fired up for this one because the first thing you told me off the air is I want to talk to people who are in business, people who don't just pontificate, but people who actually manage businesses. So let's go. I'm excited.
Excellent. Well, one of the things that, again, we talked about, you spend a lot of time working with sports psychologists. You've learned a lot over your body of knowledge of all the things that you've done. Tell me about how you think about performance psychology. Tell me about how you view, the psychology of leadership, and we'll just go from there.
I think the psychology of leadership, the sports psychology, the positive psychology, those are completely underrated and underutilized in business. And an example I like to use, Anthony, and it's kind of newsworthy in a sad way because he passed away last week, is Felix Baumgartner. Does that name ring a bell? So he's like an ultra athlete, right? So in 2012, Felix Baumgartner did something absolutely amazing no other human being had ever done. And it looks like you mimicked skydiver falling, so you kind of know the punchline, but he got in this tiny capsule with a giant helium balloon, went up 24 miles to the edge of space, and then walked out of the capsule just with a specialized suit and a helmet. No one ever done this. He skydived 24 miles down to Earth. It took 10 minutes just falling, four of which were free falling. And no one's had ever done this. He's the first human being to break the sound barrier. It's kind of sad because he had an accident last week. He apparently maybe had a heart attack while he was on a motorized glider. But Felix Baumgartner, what most people don't know, throughout his training and the day of that famous breaking the sound barrier skydive experiment, he was coached constantly by a sports psychologist. And the reason why I mention this is that a lot of us, and especially in business, we think of psychology only for its clinical value, which is super important, treating anxiety and depression. But in the popular culture, most people don't realize that, Anthony, just looking at Google Scholar, about half, 50% of the research in psychology is on the positive side. How do you thrive? How do you perform as an athlete? What makes people happy? And in the case of Baumgartner, how do you develop the mindset to achieve not just high performance, but ultra high performance?
I think
So
that's
that's my goal with the psychology of leadership. It's like there's this whole body of research just completely underrated.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing for our listeners to consider is, the typical application of psychology is, let's call it reactive, dealing with challenges, like mental health. And it is mental health, but it's the positive side of mental health, especially, CEOs, senior leaders, ones that are performing at the highest levels. You're probably not walking in with the full capabilities to do that. It takes a team of people. And whether it is explicit, as in through a sports psychologist or, through support networks, your C-suite or other, advisors or what's have you, the game up here is so critical to be successful. So for you, obviously, one of the most successful people in finance, is a top voice. How do you think about the game up here? How do you think about motivating others? And then how does it support you in your role as a chief investment officer?
Well, you're describing something that's desirable where all of us in business who want to achieve high performance would embrace the positive side of psychology in one way or the other. You know what, Anthony? Unlike those top athletes, there's a lot of ego in business. And a lot of people think, I have my stuff together. I've been successful. I don't need to think about and improve my mental game and my stress resilience.
Mm.
And that doesn't make any sense to me. Like if Felix Baumgartner needed a sports psychologist, if Michael Jordan had a breathing coach, George Mumford, like why don't we business leader like why aren't we humble enough to say, oh, maybe it's worth it to actually work on your mental game? And as I started exploring this, I started talking to a sports psychologist and I learned some fascinating lessons. One of which, Anthony, is you know what sports psychology is all about? It's not about winning whatsoever. It's about losing and how you learn from losses and how you grow from losses. Athletes have to embrace the fact that they're not going to win all the time. Money managers in my business must embrace the fact that we're not going to make money on every trade. No one has a crystal ball. So I'm reminded of Roger Federer, who went viral about a year ago when he made a commencement speech about his career as a tennis player. He looked at all these students and he said, look, I've played 1,500 matches and I've won 80% of them. Top tennis player of all time, or one of the top tennis players of all time. But then he goes, do you know the percentage of points that I won? Can you guess, Anthony, the percentage of points that Roger Federer, top tennis player, won?
I have no clue on that one.
It's 54%. So Roger Federer almost lost half the points he ever played. And he looks at the students and he goes, whatever game you play in life, you're going to lose. Get used to it and learn from losing. And sports psychology is all about this because it's difficult to lose, to experience setbacks in business and sports and in life. And he goes, the myth of effortless excellence is just that. It's a myth.
Mm.
So I love that Federer example, and I added it in the book in the Psychology of Leadership, kind of at the last minute. I went back and added it as an introduction because we all have to live with the uncertainty, especially in business. It is stress inducing, and we all have to stop stressing about stressing. There's no reason to add that second layer.
Hey there, folks. Anthony here. I'm super excited to invite you to two live events that are happening. One being put on by SME Strategy, September 23rd. It's going to be a webinar on how to lead into 2025, into 2026. We're going to cover strategic planning, scenario planning, implementation, training, and a bunch of leadership lessons. Just things for you to consider as you're driving forward your strategy. So depending on when you listen to this episode or watch this video, you'll hear it either in advance or in the recording. In addition, I'm going to be partnering with the HR Certification Institute to deliver a workshop on how to make strategic planning and implementation work for you as a leader. Expecting a couple thousand people on this one. It'll be very, very exciting. So Tuesday, September 30th in the morning, there'll be links in this video or in the podcast to register for either of those or watch the replay. So hope you're having a great day. Really looking forward to sharing this with you, and I hope you enjoy what's next.
So I want to ask you about stress optimization and how to build resilience in it. And what I think is just fascinating is when people think about it, they think about high performance, they think about winning, they don't think about not losing. For me, I've been in my career 20 years here. And as I was driving here, I was like, the reason I'm successful because I haven't quit. I haven't quit yet. If I do the podcast for 10 more years, it'll be great. But the thing that was a breakthrough for me is I would have high highs, which would then lead to low lows. And so I could be very successful, which would actually bring a low. And then so the thing that really supported me was keeping an even keel as much as possible so that I could be consistent, because even great wins would inevitably bring like a deeper trough of I guess, sadness, for lack of a better word. So let's talk about this stress management, stress optimization. Let's talk about being comfortable with losing. Another analogy, baseball players, the best ones only hit 300. And that's, you're missing 70% of the time. So talk to me, how do you view stress optimization, and what are the conversations you have with the people around you as they consider how to manage and optimize the stress that they have in their day-to-day?
Well, first, by the way, there's a survey that revealed that nowadays, 80% of baseball teams have a full-time sports psychologist on staff. And I suspect that 20% that are telling you they don't, they're just not telling you. And they have because they're just competitive. So it's real, and sports psychology is becoming more important as a field of research. For me, I wrote the book, The Psychology of Leadership, to improve myself as much as help others and to build my own stress resilience. And the number one finding in the entire book that was the most useful in my own personal life was from sports psychology. And it was that optimal performance does not occur at a stress level of 0. First of all, you think those top athletes, you think they're not neurotic? The sports psychologist I talked to, Dr. Daniel Zimitz, he coaches top athletes in baseball and football. He goes, they all get stressed. Now they reframe it as activation, but it's part of the game. And another way to frame this is to say that stress can actually increase your performance, but up to an optimal point, after which it's really bad for your health. And we all know that part. And you're going to choke, and your performance is actually going to decrease. The research in psychology calls this the Yerkes-Dodson's curves. And Yerkes and Dodson's, who did research on this, started 80 years ago. This is a long history of research on those stress curves. To me, it was incredibly helpful because it helped me reframe my stress as fuel for performance and build a certain acceptance of stress and realize, this is key, that different tasks have different optimal stress levels. So let's start with sports. Anthony, if I ask you to run a 100-meter dash, if you're stressed about your performance, if you're activated, if you're a little bit anxious about it, the research says that you're going to run much faster than if you're completely relaxed at a stress level near 0.
Okay.
And that is a simple task. Powerlifting, there's almost no amount, like, famously powerlifters, like they just get fully activated, pumped up, and some would describe it as stress. It's better to reframe it at activation. However, so the optimal stress levels for those simple tasks is pretty high. Now, for other tasks that are complex or that require concentration, like archery, the optimal stress level is lower. So you need to actually bring your stress. If you're too stressed, you need to bring it down. You need to do some breathing to concentrate. So if I manage a business and I run a team and we have simple tasks to do, I might set the goals pretty aggressive because those are simple tasks, but they need to be done. And those, so if you have a construction crew and they need to dig a ditch and it's just like physical energy that's required. But at the same time, I know that it's not optimal for me to go to my research and development team and say, innovate, and scream at them, innovate, innovate, by tomorrow morning, I want 10 ideas. That's actually not productive for creativity because you need concentration, you need different conditions than a stressful environment. So the Yerkes-Dodson's curves are super helpful. They're just mental models to think about how you approach different tasks and how you oversee different tasks as a leader.
I find that fascinating. So, like a lot of people talk about, we talk about in strategic planning, culture and behavior and making sure that you have values and behaviors that set. And different organizations have different values and behaviors. You think of the idea of psychological safety, like is the environment around for people to do their best work. What people don't talk about is the cultural component of the environment to make sure that it's applicable. On a trading floor, you're not saying, hey, I need you to be zen here. Meanwhile, if you're working with lasers and trying to be like a doctor and precise, in some folks, you need that exact calm. In some folks, there's a little bit of anxiety. So making sure that the stress level and kind of cortisol anxiety, but using that as, like you said, activation or fuel is appropriate to the task or tasks. And I think the undertone there is having the awareness as a leader and as a motivator, when to harness which kind of pressure style? Is the time to turn the pressure up and kick people's asses? Is there a time to turn the pressure down and say, hey, take the night off. You guys need to unwind, and then just be mindful of recognizing that it's not a constant state. Too high for too long, you'll burn out. Too low for too long, people will get complacent. And so being in it and playing it is critical. Do you see things the same way?
Bingo. You hit the nail on the head. Pick your cliche. Most leaders have two speeds, right? Some leaders, their style is just drive hard and push the organization hard all the time. And other leaders are more gentle, encouraging. But the way you describe it is the way to think about it, which is certain tasks, certain moments call for all getting pumped up and fired up, and other moments call for taking your foot off the accelerator so the team can perform optimally. And it has to do with task specific stress curves. And by the way, stress curves apply to team as well. Now, here's another component for leadership that's super critical. Leadership's about empathy and understanding people and helping them perform at their best. It's not about you, ultimately. It's about your ability to help people perform their best and get the most out of the team. The reality is that different people have different stress curves. And you need to have empathy and understanding of that. Some people will perform better under high pressure, and others will perform better with less pressure. Some will have higher stress tolerance. Other will have lower stress tolerance, all the way to an extreme level of, say, clinical anxiety, which is very difficult to deal with, and I don't talk about clinical issues in the book, but there's a whole spectrum here. And I like to use the example of Neil Armstrong, Anthony, because when the lunar module for the first man, when humanity went to the moon, right? The computer stopped working, and even communication stopped working, and it veered off course. It ran out of fuel, and Armstrong had to take manual control. So imagine, this is we're marching towards a defining moment in humanity's history. You're Neil Armstrong and nothing's working, and you're about 2 minutes from having to land or crash. There's no way you can reverse the mission, and you don't have communication. Computer's not working. You're out of fuel, and you need to take manual command. He landed the thing in the wrong spot and everything, but he landed the thing. Here's the fascinating part most people don't know. As an astronaut, he was hooked to a heart rate monitor. Can you guess, Anthony, what Neil Armstrong's average heart rate was during that landing?
I would have thought it'd be relatively low, to be honest, but I could be wrong.
You're right.
Yeah.
It was 75, which is remarkable because for most people, that's a resting heart rate. It did peak at 150 just when he landed. But I use that example to say Neil Armstrong's stress curve was up and to the left. He could deliver extraordinary performance at very low stress level. And different people have different stress curves. We want to be like Neil Armstrong, but we're not all like Neil Armstrong. First of all, he had a lot of repetitions. He was actually flying fighter jets in the war, right? And you had a lot of experience and probably a genetic makeup that made him more stress tolerant and able to perform at lower levels of stress. But we can all get better at this. We can practice it. And there are all sorts of techniques from sports psychology that can help us be more like Neil Armstrong. And so to me, that was super important in my life. 25 years in the business, Anthony, I was still stressed at work. I still am. I think it's normal to have a certain level of stress. But I was beating myself up. I kept thinking, I've been doing this for 25 years, high-level finance. Why am I still anxious about it? And I didn't need that second layer. I just needed to realize that there is, to a certain extent, an activation or anxiety cost to high performance. I don't think Felix Baumgartner, before he jumped off from 24 miles up near the edge of space, was calm as a cucumber. I think he was someone who learned to optimize his stress curve.
So if y'all haven't seen that video, phenomenal video, big rebel thing. I think that, it's what I hear is, as you've grown in your career, Sebastian, it took a long time to get to that point, but, through either visualization, practice, calming techniques, and then the confidence to say, hey, I've been here before. I've seen this. I've done that. And then making sure that you're using the strength or using the stress as a tool, not stressing about the stress, then you're kind of getting out of control. Is to just, hey, center yourself, use it to help you stay focused, help you stay productive. And then I think the other takeaway here is that everybody has a different level of stress. So for you as a leader to say, hey, who am I talking to? What is their level of stress and what are they comfortable with? And then are they in that zone where higher stress motivates them or breaks them? And conversely, the other way around. So there's lessons to learn as individual leaders and lessons to learn as leaders of people. And technically, arguably, if you're a leader, there's other people around. Sebastian, it's phenomenal stuff here. I wish we could talk longer. Where can people connect with you? Where can they get your book? Where can they learn more about your life's work?
Anthony, before I say that, the way you summarize my points is amazing. Like,
Thank you,
I'm really impressed. Like, you really get the concepts and summarize them super well. Well, like this is awesome.
You make it easy. You make it easy. So thank you.
People can find me on LinkedIn. That's the platform where I'm most active. And the book, The Psychology of Leadership, which is about self-improvement and leadership in all areas of life, is available wherever you buy books. And you can also look to psychologyofleadership.net and ET.
Excellent. Sebastian, thanks for the time today. It's been such a pleasure.
Welcome, likewise.
Folks, my guest, Sebastian Page, as you think of, movies and you think of the highest stress work environments, I probably, oil rigs and that thing is one, and the finance trading floor dealing with money is one of the other ones. And to perform at that high level for such a long time, you need to have composure of yourself. You need to be able to support others, to be able to manage a portfolio of 500 billion as an enterprise is no small task. So, there's a lot to take away from here. There's a lot you can borrow from others. You do not need to do this from scratch. Just, the inner game to help you be in the best state for you. My state, Sebastian's state, your neighbor's state is not the best state for you. So be curious about where you're at, what helps you, what hinders you, the inner game. And hopefully today's podcast helps get you to another level. Maybe not 24 miles in the air, another level, but whatever makes sense for you. So I appreciate you. Once again, my guest, Sebastian Page, author of The Psychology of Leadership. Thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for sharing. And I'll see you next time.